Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And we turn our attention now to a topic that the Commissioner Ferreira, mentioned right at the start yesterday when she said cohesion is not just a matter for cohesion policy. And the high-level group on the future of cohesion policy went even further, saying it's far too important to be left to cohesion policy alone. So, how do we do this in practice? I am delighted, in order to lead this discussion, please join me in welcoming onto the stage our moderator for this session, Alison Hunter, Senior Advisor to the Brussels-based think tank European Policy Centre on Cohesion Policy, Regional Innovation and Industrial Growth. Alison, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie, and a very, very warm welcome to our audience in the room and, of course, online. In just a few moments, I'm going to introduce the speakers for our panel, but just a few things before I do so. The title of this session, Cohesion, an objective shared among all policies. We've heard quite a lot about this topic, actually, in the previous panels, with respect to topics like multi-level governance, institutional capacity, and structural reforms. And in the last session, a very strong social focus was mentioned. We'd like to explore some of these themes and some of these questions in the next topic. So, for example, is cohesion a shared objective? What does that look like in practice? Why does it matter? What impacts are created when policies are aligned towards cohesion objectives? And what happens if they are not? What conditions facilitate cohesion outreach and embedding? So, a few interesting themes there, and some logistical details I'd like to draw your attention to. First of all, we have set up 3 poll questions on Slido, and they're already there for you to have a look at. And I would ask if you could please have a look and respond to them before 12:45, because that's when we'll go to the poll results. We will also have the opportunity, of course, for some more open questions on Slido if you would like to propose some. Those Slido poll questions, they are, in your country and at your level, to what extent is the territorial impact of policies taken into account? Should the do no harm to cohesion principle support policy making at all levels? And the third one, to what extent does a territorially blind approach to policy making present a challenge for the EU's convergence goals? So please do have a look at those polls and share with us your thoughts. Now a few words on the format of the session. After I have brought the panellists onto the stage, I will ask each panellist to respond to a specific question with 5 minutes each, and then a second round of more interactive themes and discussion across the panel. We'll then go to Slido. We'll get some reactions to the Slido results from our panellists, and then go out to the audience, probably through the questions on Slido, and hopefully maybe an opportunity to get some questions directly from the audience. And we'll finish with a final short statement from our panellists, and hopefully a few concluding remarks from me if there is time. So, I'd now like to introduce all of our panellists and ask, please, could you all join me on the stage? And as they do so, I will tell you who they are. So please, panellists, come and join me on the stage. We have Mr. Ivan Bartosz, who is the Deputy Prime Minister for Digitisation and Minister of Regional Development in Czechia. We have Willy Rudman, who is Minister of Economic Affairs in Finland, who also is responsible for innovation and enterprise. We have Tibor Navracic, Minister of Public Administration and Regional Development in Hungary. We have Anama Diamantopoulou, President of Dictio, a network for reform in Greece and Europe, and of course also served as Commissioner for Employment, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities from 1999 to 2004. And last but not least, Ms. Mirka Vekapera, Member of the European Committee of the Regions, is also Chair of the Oulu City Board. Thank you, panellists. You're all very welcome. As I said, I'm going to start with the first round of questions, and I will ask each of you a specific question with 5 minutes to respond, if you would, just to get us going and to give you an opportunity to do a first round of interventions. I'd like to start with you, if I could, Minister Bartosz. The 9th Cohesion report it suggests in it, promoting cohesion is not the responsibility of cohesion policy alone. We've heard that a lot during this forum. Is EU cohesion an ambition that is shared across member states with respect to the delivery of EU and domestic policies and investments? Over to you.
So, dear Alison and dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy that I can be here, and thank you for the first question. And even though I'll try to fit it in 5 minutes, the answer is quite simple. And let me start to say that the cohesion policy has already and repeatedly proved its success as a long-term structural investment for all regions. On one hand, aiming about all at their harmonious and balanced development, while in the same time supporting the overall economic performance and competitiveness of EU on the global level. So we are asking if it's supposed to promote itself. It already does. I mean, we have to admit it, and we saw them from the figures yesterday showed by Commissioner Ferreira, but the others, how the overall performance of the region and the states and EU went up due to we helped through cohesion to individual region. It offers a catalyst for investments. It supports a single market and convergence. It's just undeniable. So that's the first part. Lately, and even not on these forums, but we noticed opinions and tendencies that seek to limit radically the future of cohesion policy as we know it now. And I'm deeply concerned about those ideas. And therefore, I may even ask you here, what do you think, how would European Union after those 30 years would look like without the cohesion policy? It should be remembered that the cohesion policy is an engine of European integration and building resilience and condition for implementation European values. It should be remembered that the cohesion policy has played a key role in promoting convergence and reducing economic disparities between EU regions for already, and I mentioned that, 3 decades. So it's not possible to speak only about cohesion or convergence. Both convergence and the cohesions are two sides of the same coin. So what does it mean to you, or what does it mean to me? For me, it means a strong, competitive, and resilient EU regions by aligning it with EU priorities, but regarding regional nuances and different levels of development. And I completely agree that EU convergence cannot be the sole responsibility for cohesion policy, although cohesion policy is the main instrument to achieve that. And regarding to that question, and I'm responsible for regional development, and I use cohesion policy and European funds to supporting that as a tool. But no matter what kind of legislation or policy we are applying to the region as a national government, it always has its impact. It could very easily introduce disparities and disbalance to already well-performed regions. And if you can see, and it was shown from yesterday maps, regions that were already raised up could easily fall down just because some circumstances, it could be more COVID impact. And I was quite scared of this prediction, what's gonna be 2050 when the average temperature would raise up to 2%, or when the demographic, which was mentioned as a challenge, but we have to admit it's an issue with the demographic development of the Europe, would go to elder population. We have to somehow readdress things that we thought are already solved. Maybe to conclude shortly, I believe that convergence of a EU region still should remain, because it is a priority of EU and the core priority and cohesion as a main tool to achieve and avoiding negative impacts of things that are just happening towards the convergence. And one of them things I believe, and it was mentioned here very often, and I quoted yesterday for Financial Times Commissioner Ferreira, turn hope into action. And when I go to regions, when I talk to people, even though they do not know sometimes that all the benefits that are through European funds and cohesion policy and our approach, it's turning hopes and dreams into reality. And I mean, this good message is the biggest advertisement, and it should be carried by all of those, and it doesn't matter if it's industry and trade, investors, or transport, that this particular policy with a strong background of third of European budget should remain and be used as one of the main tools for the future, which is coming out from the 9th report, and I hope we will carry that not only now, but after 2027. So thank you all for the opening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bartosz. So I'd like to go now to Minister Rodman, if I can. Obviously, you're coming from the national level, but I wanted to ask you about the national approach to regional development. Again, in the 9th Cohesion Report, it says national policies and cohesion policy should be mutually reinforcing, leading to a more comprehensive and effective approach to regional development. What are the national considerations concerning this conclusion?
I would like to underline a few very important points that must be taken into account when it comes to future cohesion policies,
Yes, please.
both in EU level and on the national level as well. First of all, in current day's world, everything is geopolitics. Russia is having its illegal war of aggression on Ukraine, and it's affecting the whole Europe. It's affecting everything we're doing, and it's also affecting the cohesion politics and its priorities. Because the landscape has changed dramatically. From the Finnish perspective, which is not only the Finnish perspective, but also the perspective of the countries that are sharing eastern border with Russia or are close to Russia geographically. Few points of views. First of all, there used to be tourists in eastern Finland, and several companies in eastern Finland have based their economical activities on Russian tourists. But due to the war, the tourists have disappeared. It's affecting heavily eastern Finland and eastern parts of European Union. Secondly, there are also those supply chains. Before the war, several raw materials were coming from the Russian side to Europe, to Finland, and made higher value products here in Europe. Those supply chains have, in a large extent, also disappeared, and it's affecting heavily on the industrial activities in the eastern border of the European Union. And of course, this is affecting also the regional possibilities to make business, to maintain the welfare services and all things like that. And make no mistake, don't get me wrong, Finland stands 100% behind the sanction policies we're having because we need to stand united. Ukraine is very important for Europe, it's part of Europe, and we cannot accept the aggressive ways and policies and the war Russia is having on Ukraine, and we need to stand by Ukraine's side. But on the other hand, we also must take into account that sanctions and this politics are heavily affecting to Europe and especially eastern border of the European Union. And this must be taken into account when the new priorities of the cohesion politics are made in European Union. Second point I would like to raise is that we must do all our policies so that they are playing for the same goal. And at the moment, which is pretty understandable, we are also reacting the geopolitical issues on industry political level. But we have also given somewhat wrong answers concerning to that, because if we are competing on investments, by paying huge amounts of state aid. So actually, we're competing and having competition between European nations instead of having competition between Europe and other continents. And that's not a good thing, because I think one of the greatest assets that European Union has had and still has is the functioning single market. And it's very important that we are doing things in a market-oriented way, so that we are not having competition on state aid, but competition between our competencies, between knowledge, between our good companies, so that there is a good level playing field for all the companies, despite of different kinds of national policies and national prerequisites that the companies are having.
Minister, 1 more minute, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when it comes to cohesion policies, so it's very important that we are having those objectives crystal clear, and then we're choosing the right tools to achieve the goals, and also leave space for technological neutrality, and also the national approaches and national competitiveness and national features that varies between our countries. So these are my few remarks concerning the future cohesion politics.
Thank you very much. Important points there about the level playing field, and certainly, of course, the geopolitical situation. I'd like to turn, this is a nice turn actually, into to Minister Navracic, because I wanted to ask you, on a very related point, the do not harm cohesion principle implies a stronger territorial sensitivity, and we've just been hearing about some of the impacts on the eastern border and with respect to what is happening there. But they need a stronger territorial sensitivity in policy design and in the ongoing assessment of policy outcomes and impacts. How can the future cohesion policy help to facilitate that more holistic effort towards greater territorial sensitivity?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I think the secret of the success in the future can be to find a proper and good balance between designing activities coming from the top-down strategies, EU-wide strategies, national strategies, regional strategies, and so on and so forth, and some of the ideas and the plans coming from below. We have to rely on local communities and also regional communities, micro and macro regional communities as well, and we have to strike a good balance on these different aspects, because I don't believe in the one-size-fits-all principle in Europe. I think it can really harm the principle of cohesion if we make uniform decisions dictated from a center. We need a partnership, and we need the multi-level governance and all these structures and institutions of the multi-level governance, more powers to regional and local authorities. However, we have to calculate with the risks of this decentralization, because my personal experience is that sometimes there's a lack of skills, competence, and intellectual capacity at local level to handle the sometimes very complex and complicated EU funds. Some of the corruption cases, for instance, comes simply from the lack of skills and lack of capacity to handle and manage all those projects. So we need capacity building. We need a very strong focus on enabling local actors, institutions, authorities to make them able at managing all those projects. And we need a very sophisticated multi-layer governance system to adjust the ideas coming from below and to put it in a bigger picture at European level.
Thank you very much. Really interesting points, and actually picks up very well on some points that were being made yesterday about the level of powers at a local level, but the power to act and the capacity to act. And as you've mentioned, skills, capacity, multi-level governance, this came up yesterday. But also the point that you're making is that if we don't get that right, we actually could harm cohesion as a consequence of that. So a really important point there, and actually links very nicely to the area that Ms. Diamantopoulou would like to talk to us about. Your recent work at national and regional level points to and outlines the importance of undertaking that place-based orientation to policy making, especially with respect to something very close to your heart, social investment, the social investment agenda. Which EU and national policies might benefit from a greater place-based assessment? How might that be achieved? And I think you've got a slide that you wanted to share with us too. If we could have that slide, please. Please, over to you. It's on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank you, the Commissioner, for this invitation and to congratulate Andreas and his team for this report, because the report we have in our hands is really a political tool, because it illustrates in an excellent way the situation in Europe, the indicators, which are very important, and what was the role and the impact of the cohesion policy in Europe, and we can see it at a glance. So, congratulations from my heart. Now, speaking about cohesion, the Commissioner yesterday said something which is really very nice, that cohesion is the machine of convergence at the European level. And yes, it is. But we are entering a new era, and we have new needs, which means new reforms and new structures, infrastructures. We have new trends, new megatrends. We have discussed a lot of that these 2 days, which means transition period. We have new problems, new challenges, and it is obvious that we need more resources. And we don't have more resources. We have more problems and less money. So we must be very concrete. The cohesion policy is something that everybody likes. And you saw that in all panels, there is no different arguments. Yes, it's a very good policy. But of course, it's a major political issue, and there are very big differences in the way we can see cohesion. We saw the previous panel, the discussion about the theater. Yes, the European Union invests on walls, but can European Union invest on theatrical performances or in the function of kindergarten in all Europe? These are big problems, and the answer is not an easy one. And I would like just to undermine in this my first words that we have in the next period to work and to decide about priorities. If we do not have political priorities at European level, and then the national policies are something quite different, we cannot do it all. And when we try to do it all, then we do nothing in the end of the day. So in your particular question, what are the policies that could have an immediate impact because of the cohesion, because of the place-driven, place-based policies? The answer could be very easy, because we're in the 21st century, and I would immediately say that, look, if we invest and if we have concrete goals in digitalization, particularly in regions, we could be very concrete and we could have results. But unfortunately, this is not the answer, because the issue and the reply is more complicated. So it is obvious, and it has become obvious, that we need specific policies in these regions that are lagging behind, that will retain the human resources at place, again, I say in the not privileged regions, and at the same time, they have to attract people. So we spoke about industrialization of Europe, about private investment, about the need to concentrate in these regions in order to make them competitive. But if people is not there, if young, skilled people are not there, there is no possibility to have any result because we have nice infrastructure. In the report of the high-level group that we presented, I was chairing a high-level group in the previous years. In 2023, we presented it. And it was about the reform of social protection and the welfare state for the 2030, taking into account all these new mega trends. We worked on an age-based policy. We put in front of policies the need to have a holistic social policy that addresses the life cycle approach. So starting from children to the 100 years old people. I had this, I would like just you to have a look at this. This is the situation today in Europe. 1 in 5 children are at the risk of poverty at a European level. And there are countries where it is 30 and countries where it is 35. So when 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 3 children are at risk of poverty, so they have a very problematic starting point, there is a need of a priority for children. And there is a priority for young people, because here you can see 70% of people are in niche, neither in employment nor in education. You can imagine what it means for a non-privileged region where the young people in some regions sit in more than 50% that they are not in employment, nor in employment, neither in education. So there is a need, in order to have a comprehensive answer, that there isn't a combination at the European level. There is a combination of European and national policies with priorities on children and young people. And young people means that, to come to the less privileged regions, it means that we have to have priorities for skills for young people in 3 areas. We have identified it in our report. Sorry.
1 minute, if you would, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And these priorities are the green skills, the digital skills, and the career skills, which are one of the most important areas, because you can see that the old men, the old women, the old people are, the population of old people is increasing at the European level, and particularly in these regions, there are no infrastructure to support people over 75. So young people are moving, young couples are moving, and old people are desperate. There is a second part, and I'm finishing with, concluding with that in your question: how could this be achieved? Since it is obvious from what I have said that social investment is a priority in order to have competitiveness, in order to have industrialization, in order to have growth, I think that we have to see social investment from a different approach, because social investment is not only social infrastructure. It has to do with innovation. Social service must be digitalized, must be more innovative than it was in the past. And this means that cooperation, not only between regions, but between among member states on innovative social approaches, and we have some excellent examples at the European level, could be very effective. I'm coming back to an old approach, the method of open cooperation. Maybe the Commissioner remembers that, which was, and I think there are many networks that work on that, how regions can work and see how new social investment and social policies work. And this is my last point, it is not just a matter of Europe, it is not just a matter of national governments, it's a matter of cooperation among local authorities, civil society, the scientific world, because we need new humanistic approaches on this area, and youth organizations. So we need a network of people in order to have very concrete results, not only in social investment, but in social services and social cooperation as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Diamantopoulos. That's the idea of combining policies, the idea that it's not just about one direction, the cooperation and the innovation that you mentioned, and having all of these actors together in networks, very important, and actually leads in very, very nicely to our last speaker in this first round, Ms. Vekapera, excuse me. How can the future cohesion policy help to prevent the risks of policies, interventions and investments concentrating benefits in the EU's most developed territories and regions? And I know you want to give us a very specific example here, so I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Firstly, I would like to start by saying congratulations all the high-level group members. You did a major work that we can now celebrate and somehow to figure out what the future is. Congratulations, Madam Vereira and all the people who did a major work. The short answer to your question, Alison, could be from the report, actually, from the recommendation. How we see the cohesion in the future, territorial sensitiveness and flexibility, a policy that supports stakeholders' involvement, harness global opportunities and create integrated, holistic policy framework in multi-level governance. That's from the report. But let me reflect those key recommendations by sharing an example from my own region, Oulu, which is in northern Finland. It was recognized that the Arctic can provide Europe with knowledge, products, resources, and energy that are crucial to achieving both the EU climate as well as competitive goals. The EU's strong industries based on natural resources in the Arctic include energy production, tourism, mining, forestry, bioenergy, and fisheries. And the strong ICT sector capacity, like we have in Oulu actually, support the transition. In Arctic, we are facing decreasing public funding, lack of public services, as I already know that everywhere in Europe, transport connections and other infrastructure vulnerabilities and democratic challenges. The European Arctic has also become a geopolitical hotspot and face a new security situation, and that what our Minister Wille Rydman already told, that what the situation is in the east part of Finland and near the borderline. But as you already know, that Finland and Sweden joined NATO recently, and military activities have increased significantly in the north. Having intelligence also to economic, business development and infrastructure needs. All major regional development stakeholders with the north part of Finland realized very suddenly that we need a new holistic and place-based approach to the policy agenda for the north. So that's why we wrote the Northern Agenda. It is a strategy framework how to strengthen Finland and even Europeans' geopolitical states and sustainable growth by utilizing the expertise, energy, energy, logistics, natural resources, and outstanding attitude of the North, while contributing also the challenges in the identified concerning the new security landscape. And this all experience brings back me to the cohesion policy. When we launched that Northern Agenda, we did not directly ask for the money, but rather for the better understanding of the need for our work jointly for a place-based holistic strategy, but have a strong territorial dimension, but in the fact serves in the Finland as a whole. Of course, the implementation requires resources and collaboration, not only inside Finland, but also the border to Sweden and Norway on regional, national, and also in EU level.
1 more minute, please.
Yes. Finally, I will think about the cohesion policy in North perspective. We need a lot of cooperation between the different countries, also the support from bottom to top of the level in national and also in EU level, that what is going on in north part of Finland, Sweden and Norway. There's a huge investments coming during the next 10 years. More than 150 billion investments in industry, in forest and mining, and in tourism, and all digitalization and all things like that. So we need a lot of support and also the money and a big pocket to help us to survive and do those investments also.
Thank you very much. Very important points. I'd like to come back, if I could, to Mr. Bartosz, because I want to pick up on a couple of the things. For example, it's not just about the money, is what we've just heard, but you need the money, but you also have to think about the structures, and we have to think about the use of innovation. Innovation in policy and innovation policy were some of the things that have already been mentioned. With respect, Mr. Bartosz, to the asymmetric impacts of the recent crises, what key strategic lessons do we need to learn about the direction for the next cohesion policy if we want to ensure we're not harming cohesion?
We do have many tools already set up. Are we using them? In many cases, we do not. When I decided to try to join politics 15 years ago, I was kind of upset on a national level, but also on the European level, that we somehow did not turn into information society. Of the years of cohesion and data collected in the regions and evaluations made on national level, we already know what are the needs, what are the key vectors of success, and what are the starting points on the particular regions on them needs, right? It was mentioned here previously, I don't know if it was you, Minister, or someone else, of equity and equality. We cannot have equity on base, right? We offer help through the European funds, but the possibility to access them in the time when you need them for particular disbalances in region is quite limited. So basically, what I'm saying, we can use the data and measure the KPIs, which were in the 8th cohesion report, when it was also commented by European institutions, hey guys, do you have a KPIs? What were the results, right? Does this long-term strategy in its milestones bringing the things that you were expected? So I believe use the data, KPIs, and do have evaluate if this particular program is helping on that particular challenge that you have in the regions. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we build it up pretty decent structure. Maybe it's overcomplicated, right? But if we do have a new challenge, which is usually a crisis of particular kind, it doesn't mean you need to have a new instrument to that. You know, we can work, and I used to work as an enterprise architect, so you've got this common data model that somehow describes the environment, the enterprise, and then you just changing it, how the reality is changing, the best way to describe what's the state of play. And since we had all those three crises mentioned here, which was, okay, it was a financial crisis, but basically it's a COVID, war, and energy and inflation crisis, we somehow went through, and we went through easier than before. Commissioner Ferreira yesterday said, okay, it took us 2 years to get to pre-COVID numbers, even with the tourism, right? And we had already war in Ukraine, you know, the Russia attack. So we do have tools. So I would challenge rather the effectiveness of its usage, precise targeting, and immediate evaluation, rather than thinking, let's close this chapter and do something completely new.
Okay.
And with this equity principle, okay, somebody, it's like with the education, right? If you discover talent, it doesn't, you just like, there's a little push and the talent just grows up. There are talents that are undiscovered.
Great.
So we should help to prepare the strategy to those who just won't fit in current level of play of the developed regions.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to come to Mr. Navracic, because this kind of links to what you were saying at the beginning about the top-down, bottom-up policy making. Anything you'd like to add to what you've just heard about how we better deal with future crises, the tools we have at our disposal?
Well, yeah, but resilience is just becoming a buzzword, but basically that's the essence. I think we have to have a complex vision about the region when we talk about a certain region. And there's no region in abstracto. There are only concrete, real regions, and we have to make the profile of that region, and we have to have a multi-policy approach. I can mention one example. My hometown, Veszprém in Hungary, was the European Capital of Culture last year. And we, from the beginning, we defined it as a regional development project. And we made a pool for 116 local governments in the region, in the area. And we're just supporting a pretty successful local and regional development project based on culture, on the power of culture, and also creative industries. It can mobilize all the powers, resources of the region. This is around Lake Balaton. We have a university in the center of that project, and a pretty broad coalition. I mean, 116 local governments. The smallest one have 50 inhabitants. The biggest one has 65,000 inhabitants. That's the center. And we are now trying to identify all the challenges, all the problems, but not exclusively in the language of regional policy, but using the languages of other policies as well, because I think this comprehensive attitude, this comprehensive approach can help a region to develop themselves and their capacities.
Thank you very much. I like the phrase you used, the language of other policies, bringing other policies together. With respect to that, could I turn to you now, Mr. Rudman? This idea of developing more territorial sensitivity to understand what is needed on the ground. We've heard about the use of tools to understand data analysis, etc. What more do you think we need to be doing to develop that idea of territorial sensitivity?
It's very important to utilize the local knowledge when it comes to needs and when it comes to best practices we can do in order to help those areas that need cohesion politics. But it's very important to take into account the two different things that must be followed simultaneously, so that we need to utilize the local knowledge, but we also need to have proper checks and balances, so that we also take care about the taxpayers' money that are used. Because if the taxpayers' money is not used properly and according to rules and procedures, so that is also harming the trustworthiness of the cohesion politics as well. But it's very important to take into account that our policies are flexible enough, because the world is changing rapidly, and it's very important that also cohesion politics are reacting effectively enough to the crises we're having, such as, for example, the war that is going on in Ukraine as Russia attacked Ukraine in its illegal war, and it's affecting the whole continent, but especially the eastern parts of Europe, so that we have flexible procedures so that we can react rapidly those changes, because if we do not react rapidly enough, so we might lose the correct and the most important moments in the procedure. So those things are the key issues that must take into account when the local knowledge is utilized.
Thank you very much. Strong principles there. Trust, the balance around getting checks and balances right, but using local knowledge and policy flexibility. I wanted to turn to our two ladies to talk a little bit more about what support we need around things like in-country disparities. We talked a lot about in-country disparities yesterday, and of course these have an impact on cohesion. So what more should we be doing to address in-country disparities, and with, of course, respect to the convergence challenge that we still face? Ms. Diamantopoulou, could I take some points from you on that?
Yes, thank you. In the report, there is this map, I think we showed it yesterday, which illustrates the governance capacity in the member states, in the regions. I think this is a key factor. We can see that disparities in a country has a lot to do, of course, with geography, with history, but it has very much to do with the governance capacity. And again, it is interesting when you see this map that this capacity has to do with the history of the area, with the age of democracy, and of course with the political consensus that there is in a country. Why I refer to that? Because we see that there are regions which are stuck. I mean, they don't change through the years. And there's so many money, a lot of effort. And when you try to see what was back, it is a matter of centralization. I mean, money has not been decentralized. It is a matter of institution building, and this means that we have to train people in the regions. You cannot just give money. I mean, this is easy money, and they have no result. So it means training. And again, I come back to the cooperation between regions. So in a country, within a country, or in the borders, we heard about the cooperation between countries on the borders, can play a very important role and can change the balance of power. Now, I would like just to make a very short comment.
If you would, please. Thank you.
Yes. What it is interesting at European level and very important, and for the cohesion, and not only for the economic and social, but for the political cohesion, is to understand what is going on in the borders of other countries. These days, we heard all our European citizens, European politicians from the Eastern countries to speak about Russia. It is important for people who are not so close to the borders to understand what it means. It is important for people in East or in West to understand what it means to have in your borders the Turks. it is important to understand that Spain now has a problem in Gibraltar. So if we understand, or smelting ice in Arctic and dry areas in Spain and in Greece and in Cyprus, totally different issues, but the same reason, the climate change. So it is so important, and I think this kind of conferences help to that, to understand that we belong to a unique place, which is Europe, and it's not only our small country which has problems.
Thank you very much. Very important point. Ms. Vicapera, the point that was made about political consensus and political cohesion is actually a rather important one. It's not something I think we've talked a great deal about so far. Is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of how this may, when we don't have this type of cohesion, how this affects policy making, how it then affects cohesion as a whole, how it affects convergence, for example?
Well, we have faced a lot of crises in Europe last couple of years. But still, I think we have tools to figure out those crises and things what is going on, like COVID pandemic and also like that. But I'm like a little bit old-fashioned female that I like long-term strategies. And a cohesion policy is a main pillar in European politics and also in our national politics as well. And when we talk about the cohesion policy in a local level, we have to get a trust from the stakeholders, the local people, the local institutions, and all of the people who are living there. And we have to focus on those strategy, what we have decided, not just doing something else tomorrow and next year. But we have to have a strong strategy in how we use the cohesion fund, which is huge in my region in Finland. And we are focusing on healthcare, digitalization things, for example, greening our energy system, and to everything in mobility way in education. If you talk about energy issues or mining, we use the digitalization in that field.
Okay.
And that's the strategy what we are facing.
Thank you very much. Really important points. We're running over a little bit in this section, but I wanted to ask Mr. Bartosz, you wanted to come in with something.
Maybe I want to get back, and I love what you said, right, that we do cohesion on the national level as well. Any legislation that we are implementing, it has different effects on the regions. So anytime if you do something global, okay, you can give back on taxes, different amount of money to the regions through the division of tax collection. But anything that you introduce, it can be things that affects education, hours of education, implementing some new taxation, it has different impact. So anytime, and we add that as a principle to any legislation that we are proposing as the government, it has to have a risk and regional impact analysis, because then you need additional tools to actually, secure this global legislation that in one land country, because we are not federal republics, right? It just applies to everyone, how it works in them regions. So cohesion principles, even within local and national policies, is very important to have this extra how to handle the different impact of the global policy to the local and regional areas.
Thank you, Mr. Bartosz. Thank you very much for that. I think a very big message there about the extent to which we have to understand cohesion. And as you said, using tools, territorial impact assessments, these different mechanisms where we understand the policies,
Can
not
I
just
make
at regional level.
Can I just say something
very rapidly, please, because we're running over
what
very
the Minister said now? I very much agree on this national cohesion issue and the link with taxation. But maybe it is time, because of the globalized economy, to think about a European taxation, at least to agree on minimum taxation for companies, because it has become a very competitive issue between member states, and it has created a lot of problems to the cohesion funds, because when you have very big differences in taxation in countries with the same borders, then you can see immediately that industry runs from the one country to the other.
Thank you. Certainly a question for maybe a discussion over coffee, European taxation, how ought we to be thinking about that? But let's also think that, as we've said, this is not just about cohesion policy. We're talking about cohesion as the concept. So this is not all about all the fixes that cohesion policy has to make. I'd like to go now, if we can please, to the results of our poll questions. I'm very keen to see what we've got there. Is it possible for us to put onto the screen the results of the first poll question, which was, in your country or at your level, to what extent is the territorial impact of policies taken into account? Interesting response, 68% there on sometimes, so 2/3 on sometimes. More to do there, clearly. I'm going to ask our panelists to have to maybe reflect on these in just a moment, but let's go to the second question. Should the do no harm to cohesion principle support policy making at all levels? The next one. Yes, just over half. Okay. Very interesting question and result on that one. Somewhat 24. So together, okay, about 75% on that one. And can we go to the third result, please? To what extent does a territorially blind approach to policymaking present a challenge? Well, over 2/3 saying it's a significant challenge and also something of a challenge. So clearly, territorial blind approaches are evident and presenting challenges in almost 100% of the cases. Could I very quickly go to our panelists, and just for a really rapid response to what you've just seen there. Mr. Rudman, any response to what you see from those results?
Well, those results are not surprising. They are quite obvious in many ways, but it also underlines the point that cohesion politics, they are seen as very important parts of European Union and the policies we're making, both in EU level and also on the national level. But it also underlines the fact that our audience still sees some room for improvements when it comes to those politics that we're making. So interesting points of views.
Thank you very much. Anything else from any of our other panelists? What you might like to see?
From the audience.
Yeah.
There are only 2 or 3 people, so I think
I see there's a lot of questions that have come in.
People.
A lot of questions have come in openly, so perhaps there were more those ones that were
It's Slido, it's already dead technology.
Yeah, exactly.
I was kind of surprised by number 2.
Yes, me too.
But maybe it's because the question was set up, it's hard to answer just like yes, no, maybe, right? Because probably all of them principles that are implemented in cohesion regarding the climate, enterprises, environment protection are common in all the policies that you are deploying. But when we were saying we need to know the nature of the region, maybe those people who were answering, okay, I don't want to have all the regions of Czech Republic have automotive capitals of Czech Republic. Obviously, some of them region is more suitable to do when we take something challenging, nanotechnology, Liberec, north of the Czech Bohemia. Some of them should be more of agriculture because they produce wine. So maybe in this particular thing, this, let's say, the story of the region defines specific approach on the global level policies as well. So I was surprised there was so little yes, but of amount of the votes, it's just a difference of like three votes in there. But I was surprised by the answer.
Please, Mr. Navracic.
Let me say a few words about these territorial blind policies consequences.
The third one, yeah.
Because Hungary has always been a very centralized country. I mean, we have a capital with 2 million inhabitants, and the second largest city has 200,000 inhabitants, so 1/10 of the capital, and the whole structure, territorial structure of the country is very centralized around the capital. And what we've seen in the past 20 years since the enlargement, since the EU membership, that in 2004, Budapest, the capital, was 129% of the EU average GDP per capita. Now it's 156%. While for instance, the Northern Great Plain region was in 2004 in 44% of the EU average, and now it's 49%. Yeah. So there's a huge divergence and territorial disparities just because of this, the overweight of the capital. And if there are territorial blind policies, the consequence can be a deep territorial gap inside the country. Hungary is not a very big country. It's a middle-sized country. But you can see even in the past 20 years that the spontaneous, I would say, the spontaneous tendencies are stretching out the countries, and the inside balance is just broken. So that's why we need a new definition of regional development. That's why we needed a new act on regional development and a new infrastructure, new institutions, and a new attitude, just to prevent these non-favorable tendencies.
Thank you for sharing that. Very important point. Jackie, I'd like to go to you now to ask about some questions that may have been posed, open questions from Slido.
Sure, the biggest theme in the questions, Alison, coming in this, is about the balance between policies and trade-offs. Someone asking, how do we find a good balance between sectoral policies and regional dimension? The questioner says, often the actions needed are contradictory. What is the best recipe? Someone else asking, shouldn't cohesion as the crucial trade-off between equity and equality be addressed in EU policy making from the very beginning? And one specific question to the competitiveness issue. The EU, says the questioner, needs to increase competitiveness. How can cohesion support that? Should we prioritize the global dimension or less developed regions? So lots of questions around that.
Yes.
And to the priority point that Anna Diamantopoulou was making at the beginning when she said, if we try to do everything, we'll end off doing nothing. Someone's saying, if the cohesion policy cannot finance all challenges, should it not focus on local and regional governments who provide the variety of services and public investments? And one last one, the most popular question, links to what this panel and others have said about the policy's flexibility in response to crises. The questioner says, is it not a misunderstanding that structural funds should respond to crises? Shouldn't crises be handled elsewhere? Lots of people raising this point. I'm sure it's an issue I'll come back to in the final panel, but interesting to get your panel's thoughts on it if there's time. Do with it what you will, Alison.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Really important points there. So the first two were actually very similar around balance and trade-offs, the equity and equality issue, and how that can be a contradiction and entails trade-offs and hard choices with respect to cohesion and, of course, other policies. The competitiveness agenda, the global dimension on the one hand, but then the less developed regions. What should cohesion do? And where should the priority be? Someone saying it should be at the local level. And how do we respond to crises? What do we have? Anyone keen to respond to any of these issues? Let me take it. Yeah, okay. Actually, let me take Ms. Vicapera first, please.
Thank you. I still speak about what the local and municipalities and cities can do in this cohesion policy. It's something what I'm figuring out all the time, because next Monday I'm deciding in my city board that we will use 15 million euros during the next couple of years, investing in those cohesion projects, and also just couple of years. And so we know what to do, and we need more flexibility in using the money and trying to boost all those instruments and those things what is going on there, and the needs.
Yep.
And also all those opportunities what we are facing and having in a local level. So we truly know what to do, but that is some kind of we have to figure out how this works better.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navracic, can I come to you now? Very quickly, if you would, please, because there's still
Could I
some
just
few
add a
things.
few words on the
Sure.
order of priorities, because maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think if we have the proper approach and method, the region will profile itself, and you will get the order of priorities. If, for instance, my home region is Lake Balaton, it obviously is not an industrial region.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are developing a creative region development plan. Or the South Trans-Danubian part used to be one of the industrial centers of Hungary, but now there's a depopulation, aging local communities, brownfield factories or plants. So it is pretty clear that we need to invest there, re-industrialize, because there's the infrastructure, there's the human capacity, power is dying out, but still there are elements of that. So we have to develop transport infrastructure, we need to attract investments there, and we have to revitalize those old industrial centers. So, and there are agricultural regions, there are maritime regions. So I think the regions itself give their profiles if there is an interest to get to know what a region look like.
Okay, so the regions themselves know what they need. We just need to provide the conditions for them to get there, in a sense. Thank you very much. Mr. Rudman.
Very briefly, let's tackle those challenges effectively that current days geopolitics and the war in Europe has created without forgetting how important it is to make sure that we also in the future have a functioning single market within the EU, because it's the greatest asset we have. We must not endanger it as we are tackling effectively those challenges that are very accurate at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. We're actually just coming to the final round, so this will be the opportunity for everyone now to give us 2 minutes, a big message or a big comment or even a question that you want to pose, that you really want to leave the audience with today. So what is it, the big message you want everyone to take away today? Can I go first of all to you, Mr. Bartosz?
I'm kind of surprised because I was about to answer the last question, but you didn't pick it up. We had a war, right, in Ukraine. When all them people sent Poland, Czech Republic, we give a shelter to about 400,000 people. If those people are coming to the regions and the basic person needs is to have a good life, accessibility to school, healthcare, all of them, it impacts the region. So the cohesion that's addressing the basic quality of life of our citizen is a solution to migration crisis caused by the war. So it's a cool tool that we know how to use. Sometimes it's a matter of put there more money or be more flexible in how you may use it under current circumstances. But as I said in the very beginning, those 30 years proved this is a smart way how to do long-term development. So this is the main message I would like to carry, which I started with. And it's also the answer for the last question. What about them crisis and if it's a suitable tool? If there is something big and we need big jump, let's use some fast money. I like RRF as well, but it's to boost up after something to do the fast step. But the long-term strategy driven by the region is what we need. And it also, and it's not only the only money that's coming into there. Venture capital plays important role. So if we combine all of them pillars of the private investments, national money, and cohesion policies, and the funds that are coming in there, we will be successful as Europe and competitive in the very end as Europe towards the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring message. Thank you indeed. Mr. Redmond, over to you.
Thank you very much. 3 points of views. First of all, everything is a geopolitics in current day's world, and it must be also taken into account when it comes to priorities in the European cohesion politics. Secondly, cohesion politics is also security politics, because if the living conditions in the eastern border of the European Union are not good, so it will also affect the security on the borders, and if security is not properly taken care of in the eastern border, it will affect the whole European Union. And thirdly, let's make sure that we have the level playing field for all kinds of companies in the European Union, because functioning single market in the European Union is our greatest asset, and it will be our greatest asset also after the times of crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Navracic, to you, please.
The 8th and the 9th cohesion report points out that the engine of the EU's cohesion policy are the Central European countries and the Central European metropolitan areas. So that means that cohesion policy is not a waste of money. I think it's just amazing that success what the Central European countries made in the EU, with the contribution, of course, with the European taxpayers, and I think that that means that that's really a success, and we have to keep it, and we have to make it more efficient. We have to make it more decentralized and locally sensitive. But basically, cohesion policy is the most important policy for the future of the European integration.
Thank you.
Since Europe is a unique creature in the political history of human beings, I think we have our own reply to politicians across the world. It's the cohesion, stupid.
Good point. Thank you very much.
Well, my takeaway is that let's do more cooperation between the cities, twin cities, with in the local regions and in regions to state level and from local to EU level as well. We need a lot of cooperation in many fields. In a local level with all the stakeholders who are in your municipality. Like my example came from Northern Agenda, what we wrote, and we are facing that and doing that work together in north part of Finland, and I fully agree that cooperation is everything.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. We are actually remarkably well ahead of time. So I'm actually going to take the last question that Jackie posed and come back to you all to get a very brief comment on it. The question was about crises. We're in a crisis period, and it doesn't look like it's ending. The role of structural funds, is it only about structural funds helping against these crises? What is it? And back to our core question, cohesion and objectives shared among all policies. How ought we to be responding to these various crises? Is it only structural funds that should be playing the role? What else should be doing the job? Let's go back in the opposite direction. One brief comment, if you would.
Well, very shortly, I will say that we have tools. We have the tools to a crisis. We have tools to a long-distance cohesion policy. But let's face the fact that we don't have money to do everything. So we have to choose. We have to figure out what is the needs and what is the big thing to do in the next cohesion term. So let's focus on the straight what we have just decided.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diamantopoulos.
Crisis is something unpredictable. So unacceptable at any time, but it is unpredictable. So since it is unpredictable, we always need new policies and new tools. But in order these new tools and policies to have an impact and a result, we need the structural funds to work before the crisis in order to have the basis to implement new policies.
Very good point. Thank you. So they provide the baseline, but they're not the full response.
Since structural funds are set by multi-annual financial framework, and it's a 7 years long planning period, I think this simply sets the limits of the flexibility of the structural funds. Structural funds for longer term planning and strategic investments and for shaping the environment of the instant direct interventions. But we need other financial tools, financial instruments for making emergency interventions. That's my conviction.
Okay, we've got a lot of consensus here so far. Mr. Bridman.
A strategic and comprehensive view and approach on these matters is absolutely needed. But at the same time, we need to be aware that the world is actually changing rapidly. And if we are not flexible enough to react those challenges, so there is the risk that we have isolated programs that do not discuss with each others. And that's actually quite the opposite for the strategic and holistic approach that is needed. So that's why I would like to call for more flexibility so that we have the current and correct tools to react those challenges we're facing in the rapidly changing world that we're living in, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bartosz.
I'll get to them strategies, which we do have on European level, on a national level, on the regional level, on the city level. And in the long term, if nothing bad happens, which usually bad things happens many times a year, so the crisis is actually new time normal, usually, you need to adjust those plans, right? And I'm happy if we can use the structures of cohesion and structural funds to adding extra money, for example, post-COVID situation with REACT, right? To already existing tool. But what I do not like is when there is some money is, in the cohesion and we need to tackle some particular thing, so we somehow take it out of the cohesion and say, this is not the long-term money at all. In them particular cases, you work with the strategic source of money, which some of them is cohesion. You can take a loan, you can use European Investment Bank in order to support particular vector of development of your country. And sometimes we've got attempts, there is one pile of money and we just divide it differently, but then it actually endangers the long-term strategy while you need to do something that's crucial, especially with the healthcare facilities through the COVID and after the COVID. So we have to think smart. I know the money we will have less, so that's why we're looking for financial instruments. That's why we shall focus on the venture capital, be a significant part of investment in our regions, have this multiplication effect more tight, then we can succeed. And a combination of tools, they just should not go against each other or combine in the stupid way, which sometimes happened with RRF and the long cohesion funds. No one knows what you should stick your project to. You still want to make it, and none of them tools that's available, it's sufficient to resolve the problem. But I believe in digital transformation, so the data and whatever AI would help us put those things together.
Thank you very much. So I think we have a broad consensus in our panel about dealing with crises. Yes, structural funds should be part of the solution, but they're certainly not the only solution. They have to be used flexibly, they have to be used as a baseline, but not as a substitution for the wider issues that we have to be addressing. We actually have time for a couple of questions from the audience. If anyone would like to ask a question before we finish up? No? We've
They
gone.
want to go lunch.
Yes, everyone needs lunch. With that, then, I'm going to make a very, very few short concluding remarks. First of all, a huge thank you, obviously, to our panel. It's been a very wide-ranging discussion. We've talked about, well, the various things we've talked about. Convergence, for example, cannot be achieved by cohesion policy alone. Very, very big message. More attention is needed to understand the impacts of policies and actions that affect the EU's level playing field. Security has become a big issue for the EU, especially along the eastern border. Cohesion can help us to better understand how different places are affected and in what ways. But cohesion policy is not the complete answer for the security challenges. Cohesion promotes a much-needed place-based orientation. It has a social investment agenda that it should be responding to. What prevents cohesion from being embedded? Well, an absence of policy directionality, silo mentality, delivery culture, also a lack of political will was actually mentioned by our panel as well, important one there. And what would the EU look like without cohesion policy? It was the question you asked at the very beginning. And I think I'd probably refer back to the European Parliament President Metzola's point she made this morning, steering cohesion policy in line with the geopolitics of change. So that's a look towards the future of cohesion. But we certainly cannot be doing without cohesion, according to our panellists today. Panellists, thank you so much for your time. I only stand between everyone and their lunch now, so thank you very much to you. Jackie, thank you for helping us with the questions.
Thank you, Alison, for a great panel. Thank you to you all, and you